Hey, and welcome to another animal communication talk. For those of you that aren't familiar with animal communication, simply think, apologies. Welcome again. For those of you that aren't familiar with animal communication, think of the amount of times you see or think of someone. You might think, oh, I wonder how they're doing. And then the phone picks up. We call it deja vu. That is also animal communication. Identical twins, one just knowing what's going on with the other. We all do it. But of course, from the baby's perspective, unless the child is actually dying, really people don't take that much notice. The child then says its first word, mum or dad or whatever, and of course everyone makes a fuss. So the baby starts learning. Telepathics really isn't getting me that far. Verbalizing my needs gets them met. So they start shutting down on one and building up on the other. Every single person can communicate with an animal, but it's like a muscle. You don't use it, you lose it. And you're not going to start having the equivalent of war and peace in your first conversation. In the same way as Tuvok used to say, you're not going to get out of a wheelchair and run a marathon. You get little bits and little bits and little bits, and it's work. Communication is like any tool in a toolbox. You don't become an expert overnight. You need to keep working at it. So many people expect so much in their first conversation or whatever, and some people will get it. Some people are that gifted. But for your average person, if I said to you, right, we're going to do, I don't know, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, you're not going to expect to do an hour session and then go in and read all of Tut's tomb, or Latin and then understand every medical term and text in a book, or going back in the past for some of the classics that were written in Latin. You don't expect that. But we do all expect that when we're learning animal communication. So we need to be a little bit realistic, but that's not to say some people can't. And we all do communicate. We're simply, because we're not aware of the process and because it's so incredibly subtle. Unfortunately, it's not the big booming voice in the Monty Python skits. It'd be great if it was, but it's not. And because we are generally so connected with our animals that a lot of what we think has come from our own thoughts is actually our animals' thoughts. And that's where people will go, oh, I thought they were saying, yeah, I thought that was just me. Or, yeah, I kind of knew that, but I don't know how I knew it. That's all communication. And every single person can do it. Obviously, some people are better than others, but for the main part, it really is. As with any skill, anyone can learn to ride a horse. Some people are more natural at it than others. Some people have better coordination than others. But I mean, go back a couple of 100 years and that was your main form of transportation. So you learned. Some people were considered gifted. Others, no matter how hard they tried, were barely competent. It's exactly the same with communication. We can all do it. And the biggest blockage is ourselves. If you're convinced you can't do it, then you can't do it. It's that simple. In the same way, when I first started, it was pre-internet, so we're going back a while. And one of the very first communications I was ever asked to do, and the woman that we did it with, hey Nicole, is still a client 25, 30 years later, was with one of her deceased horses. Now, I'd never spoken with a deceased animal. Had I believed that I couldn't, it might have been different. But I'm thinking, oh, well, read the book says I can. Guess I can. Give it a go. And of course I did. But for a lot of people, their religious upbringing or whatever else, or it's simply a concept they haven't considered, don't think they're able to do it. And yet, ironically, deceased pets is probably, it's a very big area for me. I do a lot of it. I will only communicate with them once because all you need to know is that your animal is happy and okay. Anything after that to me is grief counseling and nothing else. But it's an area that brings so much closure and so much relief for so many people. In the same way, people that work with lost pets, now I'm not one of them. Some people can work with lost pets, a lot of communicators can, just as many can't or don't. It's not my forte. The animal's freaked out. And of course, they're not going to tell you, well, I went down Jones Street, hopped over 2 fences, turned right at Smith Street, went down to Punt Road, crossed the road. It doesn't work like that. All they're going to show you is what they're seeing. And if they're under a house or a garage and they've only got a little slit of vision, they're only going to tell you what they saw. They can tell you what they hear, which can occasionally be useful, but not always. So for those of you that are looking for someone to do lost pets, unfortunately, I can't even really recommend anyone, because everybody that started when I did either doesn't do lost pets either or has retired. 25, 30 years later, I don't altogether blame them. So all I can suggest is have a look at the pages that are, Google communication, have a look at pages and go with your gut feel. Keep in mind too that telepathics has no boundaries, in exactly the same way as you can do Facebook or call someone in America or Russia or wherever you want to do. Telepathics is exactly the same, but we have no dead spots. Very useful. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can communicate with anything. So if you don't mind factoring in time zones, there's a heap of really good communicators in the States and a lot through England. And I believe there's a particularly good lady for lost pets. One of my clients was telling me in Israel. So it really doesn't matter where they are. It's just time zones, really. And as far as stuff before you contact the communicator, which is something I'm always asked, what can I do in the interim? Obviously, most animals in Australia, at least, are microchipped. Don't necessarily believe that the microchips are going to work. Too many years of being a vet nurse, I've found them in hips, I've found them in elbows, and most people with scanners just straight over the top. That'll be it. I've also found quite a few that don't pick them up before the low battery beep. So the idea is fabulous. I have absolutely no faith in it. So find out where your dog's supposed to, or your cat is supposed to go, whichever pound, and physically go down there at least every second day. Because with all due respect, most of them are hopeless. They don't know breeds. They don't know what they haven't got in. And I've seen a silver point chinchilla that they didn't recognize, and it was the only light colored cat in there, and they still didn't even think. So anywho, go down there every second day. The other thing I suggest, take someone with you, because certainly God knows the streets of Melbourne aren't safe anymore. Take someone with you at night, about midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, and call. Because particularly for cats, they're nocturnal. That's when they're more likely to be. And yeah, you're going to set off every dog in the neighborhood, details. But either your dog, if it's locked away somewhere, may well bark. And if it's a cat and they're locked in a garage or something, hello, Keithy, you're going to probably hear them. You can then mark the address. You don't go banging on the door at 2 o'clock in the morning. People get a little stressed, but you can go back the next day. And if your dog's locked in and you're worried, try and cite it and then call the police. And keep in mind too, if your animal is lost, I would draw a circle on your map, 25k radius as the crow flies, and send flies to each and every vet clinic with a photo. Because if someone is deciding to keep your pet, they're not going to go to the local vet because they're going to figure that's what you're going to do. So they'll go to one a couple of suburbs down, which is still within your 25k radius. And if you've emailed them and you keep calling once a week, because you're going to get different nurses, different vets on duty, but if you keep bothering them long enough, they really are. And anything that looks anything remotely like your animal, the vet's not going to make a big thing of it, but he is going to scan them. And there have been so many animals picked up that way. So please consider that, and your animal will be very happy. The other thing from the telepathic point of view you can do is think of your place like a lighthouse, put the beacon up the top with the X marks a spot and mentally light it. I know it sounds weird, but there's been an awful lot of animals that have found their way home after doing that. So they literally see this beacon that you put up and mentally have either flashing or running for 24 hours, whatever you want to do. And also you can imagine a connection between your heart and theirs and pull on it, because that's a particularly useful one. Also for dog recalls, and in particular horse recalls. If you're working with horse training, you imagine that connection between you and them, and as you're asking them to come and taking a step back, imagine that pulling. And I've got to say, I have, particularly with horses, I have found that works better even than treats, because horses are so energetically fine-tuned. Of course, yes, you've got the training aspect, and you've got the fact that if every time the dogs come, it's got clipped on a lead and taken off or walloped, they're going to go, yeah, no thanks, and off you go. So you do need to look at the training aspects as well, but it's a really useful one to do. And yeah, a lot of people tell me with communication, oh, I've suddenly saw this vision of gumboots in the lead or something, and I've looked up and it's 4:10, and we always take the dog out at 4. Who do you think's telling you they want to go out? It's the dog. Oi, tap, tap, tap. And they will do that in the same way other owners have said, oh, I was thinking about going for a walk or whatever, and the dog leapt up like it had an electric prod in its eyeball and going, let's go, let's go, let's go. So I figured I'd better go and do it. That shows you just how much in tune your animal often is with you. And that's something too, when people go through divorces, and unfortunately divorces these days are becoming more and more common, I'm often asked to mediate. Think of it a bit like the judge with the kids who gets custody. To me, that's not about either of you. It's about what's right for the animal. So if one person is working umpteen hours or has a rental with no backyard, sorry, put your animal first, get you gutted, but it's got nothing to do with it. If the animal is used to one person all the time, then obviously that's the person. If only one person walks and feeds and does all of that, then that's who they go with. I'm not one for shared custody. I'm really not. The animals often come back confused, and what can start as being quite nice can wind up being point scoring, as it does with children. So I have seen shared custody work occasionally, but not often. And keep in mind, it's the same as people that are going overseas for a period of time or even for a holiday. Your animals know what's going on. They will be tapped into you in exactly the same way as, say, Messenger. You can see who's on or not. I mean, whether you choose to engage, when you see the pretty green light, do I want to talk to them? No, well, you just ignore them. Or you want to chat with them and you jump online. That's exactly the same as telepathics. Only everyone's always running green. It's just whether they want to talk to you or not. So your animal will know what's going on. If you're worried about them and you're going on holidays, or a relative is sick and you've got to shoot overseas, whatever, mentally try and tune in at around about the same time every day. Your animal will soon pick up. But also make sure you imagine them calm and happy. Think of it like a kid. If mum's got to be separated for whatever reason, doesn't matter what, and she's going, oh my God, the child, how's it going to cope? Oh, I'm so worried. What's the kid going to do? He's going to pick up and go, oh no, mummy's going and she's terrified. What am I going to do? Whereas if mum's, kid will have a great time, half his luck. That's what the child's going to pick up on. Animals are exactly the same. So make sure the pictures you are sending is that you're well and happy and doing whatever you need to be doing, and that you know they're well and happy and you'll be back in X amount of days or moons. I use day night for day and night. I use moons for months. And that you know they're well and happy and that you're looking forward to seeing them at such and such a time. Animals, even if they're in a cattery or a kennel and they may not be super happy about being there, they do make the best of the situation. They do understand. And if you get caught up for any reason, flights are cancelled, and I mean, all that sort of stuff does happen, simply send them the thing. Go, look, caught out. It's going to be another 48 or 72 hours, day, night, whatever you want to do. Let them know. Your animal will then know what's going. They'll pick it up from you being really peeved and stressed and frustrated, as we all are if our flights are cancelled, but they will pick up on that. They do see that, and they then understand what's going on. They may or may not like it, but they do understand. And the more information you can give them, the better. However, communication is no substitute for training. I can chat with my horse 100 times and show him pretty pictures of me sitting on top of him and us going for a trot or a canter. He's never been saddled under saddle, I'm the one doing it. But that's no substitute for actually sitting on said horse and getting our cadence and our rhythm and our movement correct. He might get a little bit of an idea about it, but it's not the same. Having said that, I have very fond recollections of a friend of mine, Unicorn V. If you're out there listening, you'll know all about these two. And she had a horse that they were trying to work for cattle, and the horse just wasn't getting it. And the trainer just said, look, sorry, I'm going to send this horse back. It's useless. You're going to have to do something with it. She called me and I said, tell him to give it another 24 hours. My horse at the time, old Docky, had worked cattle for half his life before I got him. So I said, hey, Doc, can you have a chat with this horse, Shay, and just explain? So Docky just rolled his eyes and apparently did so, because the trainer got on the horse the next day and this horse worked cattle like it had been doing it all its life. So clearly our perception as a human as to what to do is not the same as one horse telling another, this is what you do and how you do it. This poor girl had another time where she was on at a show, and I honestly can't remember all the ins and outs, but it was stinking hot. Western Australia can be really hot. And Doc decided to start getting at her because she used to hear him all the time, and he wasn't subtle. And in the end, she forgot where she was, lost it, and told the horse to shut up, and several other choice words. And of course, everybody's just looking at her. They pulled her off the horse. They thought she had heat stress. She wasn't quite game to tell them that no, a horse in Victoria was sending her rude and sarcastic comments, and she was just responding. But it does happen. So that's one of the things I want to finish with, is the on-off switch. It's the single most important thing when you're starting to communicate that you will have, is your on-off switch. When you're starting to communicate or starting to practice, I use the old-fashioned light switches. Remember the ones that had the big round circle back in the 20s and the 30s, and the big switch, and a lot of the time they were brass. Put that as gold, because that sends a huge message to your subconscious. Then flick it on when you start communicating, and then flick it off again at the end. That is by far the best way. So you're sending a huge message to your subconscious that you're not running 24/7. Running 24/7 does not achieve anything for anyone at all. That is one of the reasons I've been successful in the field, is because when I started, it was remote, not face-to-face, so it was easier to turn off. And after years and years of being a vet nurse and not burning out, you learn very quickly to shut off. And that people will say to me, oh, if my animal says or my animal does, can guarantee you it won't, because I switch on the moment we start the consultation. We get the details. When we've finished, I've switched off, I've written your case up, that's that. So I'm not going to hear your animal. There's only one animal I hear all the time. and that's the cockatoo. And of course, he tells me he's a demigod, so that doesn't count. But please always mentally turn that switch on, start your communication, mentally turn it off as you finish. It's going to prolong your working life by a lot, and you're not going to get all the headaches and stuff that can go with running 24/7 without realizing. Boundaries are one of the biggest things for communication. All right, that's it for today. Thank you. Need to wind up. If you've got any questions, feel free, drop them in the comments. I will check back as always. And if you want to book a communication session, just drop me an email or send me a message on Messenger. Take care, guys. Enjoy the rest of the day.